Hey everybody, and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about brushes, and specifically we're going to talk about the Games and Gears Ichiban Studio Pro Line brushes. These were a Kickstarter, successful Kickstarter, that got started some months ago. I don't even remember when. And they are being sold by Games and Gears. And for those of you who don't recall, let me sort of back up to the beginning of this story, at least as far as I'm concerned. Games and Gears had a very successful Kickstarter, I want to say a year or so ago, where they were pitching some new brushes and making great claims about how wonderful these brushes were going to be. And people flocked to that Kickstarter, and it was super successful. And unfortunately, the brushes themselves were not. The brushes themselves were middling quality at best, and despite the claims that they made about the brushes, and I think even in some cases, hinting that they'd be as good as the likes of Winsor Newton or Raphael brush. And in the end, they are at best an equivalent quality to a Citadel hobby brush, which, by the way, not a bad brush, but not a great brush either. So I remember during that Kickstarter, I spent a lot of time trying to warn people not to expect too much. I participated in a lot of forums, and of course I have my videos, and so I really feel like imparting my own knowledge is something that I enjoy doing, and I kind of feel like it's important to warn people when I think they're maybe spending their money for no good reason. And in the case of those brushes, I think, yeah, you got a lot of brushes, and the price was pretty good, but if you were expecting more than a nice set of generic hobby brushes, you were going to be disappointed. So anyway, that comes to their next Kickstarter, and of course, because that Kickstarter went so poorly, when they had another one for more brushes, I was obviously wary about the Kickstarter, and again started warning people, you might want to just wait until the brushes come out and not necessarily participate in the Kickstarter, because you just don't know what you're going to get. And so I obviously didn't participate, but the thing is, this time around they had a celebrity endorsement, and supposedly these brushes were being designed by the painter from Ichiban Studio, whose name escapes me at the moment, and I'm really sorry, and I'll just put it in down here somewhere after I edit this video, so you know who I'm talking about. But I mean, we've all seen their videos, and fantastic painter, but that doesn't mean you can necessarily design a brush, and having seen the previous Games and Gears offerings for brushes, it didn't mean that they were going to be able to make good brushes, and they were making far more big claims about the quality level of these new brushes than they did about the previous brushes, which of course made me that much more wary. So anyway, what happened was one of my clients, and regular customers actually, sent me a set of brushes. He participated in the Kickstarter, and he ended up with more brushes than he needed. I think that's how that worked anyway. You can, if you're watching this and and I'm mistelling the story, please let me know in the comments. In any case, I got both the Studio Pro and the synthetic brushes. Now I'm going to focus mostly on the Studio Pro. I've played around with the synthetics a little bit, and but not really enough to do a full review. But I have spent the last 2 to 3 weeks, really ever since I got these, using these almost exclusively for all of the painting that I've done recently, and so I feel like I can form a reasonable opinion about them. Okay, so first thing, just let me say right off the bat that I was pleasantly surprised. The brushes are pretty good. The one thing that I was actually hesitant about and not really, and thinking that it was sort of a gimmick, was this whole idea that you can flip the brushes around and you know, put them in the pouch for storage, and your brushes are protected. And it seemed to me like that was an unnecessary gimmicky thing when you can just find other ways to store your brushes. And recently I've actually been traveling a lot with my paints and my brushes, doing work both here in the shop and at my store, or stores really, because I have 2 different stores in 2 different locations, and so my paints are going with me a lot of the time. And as it turns out, I kind of like this. This is pretty nice. You don't worry about it. You flip the brush around, the brush is safe, and you don't worry about it anymore. There is a trade-off though. So because of the design of the brush and its metal handle, in order to do all this, it's a little bulky. And it doesn't hurt its performance as a brush, but I don't, and it's probably just because I'm used to a slimmer handle, I don't like it as much. And it's not a deal breaker. Let's just put it that way. The bulk of the handle is workable, but it's somewhat uncomfortable. The other thing about the bulk and the material is the fact that it's fairly heavy. It's not a lot, not, and again, we're back to, it's almost like picking nits, right? It's a little heavy, it feels heavy in your hand, and as you're painting for a while, it feels like maybe your hand is tiring out where it might not otherwise do so. But not in a really horrible way, and again, it's doable. The brushes themselves are built more along the lines in terms of their in terms of the shape. It's more like the Winsor Newton Series 7 miniature series. Let me see. This is the this is the number 2. I don't think I have a number. Don't know. I think I do. And I'll do a close-up comparison. No, this is a number 3, and that was a number 4. Anyway, it's still a reasonable comparison, and the length of the Ichiban brush is like 1/2 to 3/4 that of the Winsor Newton brush, which makes it stubbier. It means it's not going to hold quite as much paint. And which is kind of how the miniature series that Winsor Newton does is very similar to that. I don't like the miniature series Winsor Newtons as much as the regular ones because it doesn't hold as much paint. I mean, it's one of the things your brush needs to do is hold paint. But it still works. It's okay. It's fine. And again, that's how I feel about this brush. It's okay. It's fine. It works pretty well. It really is interesting though. When I test out other brushes, I do have this tendency to just put the brush I'm testing down and pick up my Winsor Newton Series 7 because I just feel like, I just need it this one time to do this thing, and then I'll switch brushes, and then I'll use that for a while and realize that I haven't gone back to the brush I'm testing, and then I'll have to consciously go back and grab that brush again and go back to using it. And I didn't necessarily feel that way with these brushes. I still feel like kind of the same way I feel about the Raphael 8404s, which so many people really enjoy. I feel like that's a good brush, but I'm not used to it. It behaves a little bit differently than I expect, and so I would prefer not to use it. And that's kind of how I feel about these brushes. They perform fine. I like the fact that the brushes hold together well. You don't get any spray hairs. At least I haven't gotten that in any of these brushes yet, anyway. Whereas I might get that with a lower quality brush. And that's one of the things that happens with a low quality brush is you seem to be constantly fighting to keep your point. And that's not the case with these. And the hair quality is really good. These are clearly Kolinsky sables, and it seems to me that there is, you can't just say Kolinsky sable and expect the hair quality to be good. I imagine that there is a variety of quality levels of that brush or that fur, because I have Kolinsky sable brushes that just don't feel quite as smooth. So what am I saying overall? Well, I'm saying that I like them. They're good brushes. They're really good brushes, actually. I like having them. I like owning them. And what I wish is that I could take all of my Series 7 brushes and put them into an equivalent handle so that I could have the brush that I most like and am most used to and have it in a travel package. That would be ideal. But without that, it's kind of cool to have a brush that travels well, that performs reasonably well. It may not be my favorite brush, but it's pretty high up there. Now, for the cost, if I'm going to spend, because I think these brushes run somewhere in the neighborhood of like 15 bucks a pop in the US. And if I'm going to be spending that much money on a brush, I'm probably just going to go ahead and buy my Winsor Newton Series 7. So I would not personally seek these out and purchase them instead of another brush. But I imagine if you did, you'd be happy with them. I mean, personally, I would recommend, if you were going to spend the money on the brushes anyway, that you get the Winsor Newton Series 7. But that's because that's my favorite brush. But that doesn't mean that this couldn't be your favorite brush. And I look forward to how these are going to perform over time, because that's really one of the biggest things, one of the biggest differences that you get between a cheap brush and a good brush is longevity. So I know that a hobby brush at best is going to last me, you know, a week or two before I start fighting with it and trying to keep the point and trying to keep the stray hairs from going all over the place. Whereas with my Winsor Newton Series 7, that's never the case. And frankly, I don't know how, you know, you make a brush. As far as I'm concerned, it could be wizardry, sorcery. So I don't really know what the differences are between a good brush and a crappy brush, as opposed to, aside from the quality of the hairs that make it up. But obviously it has to be something about, you know, how much effort you put into making them. And clearly a lot of effort has gone into making these brushes. So, pleasantly surprised? Absolutely. And you know what? As long as we're here, let me mention the synthetics. And my experience with the synthetics so far has been like, kind of why bother? They're on the expensive side for synthetics. And personally, my own take on synthetics is that synthetics tend to be really good for a very, very short period of time. And then they become crappy. So why spend a lot of money on synthetics? I like synthetics for being my workhorse brushes. So they're good for a little while, and while they're good, you can use them like a normal brush. But after that, then they do things like mix paint and transfer paint from a bottle to a palette and things like that. So, you know, much as I like the Studio, I don't understand the purpose of their synthetics, at least in terms of cost. So, with that in mind, I think we can call this review done. Thank you for watching the video. If you liked the video, you know what to do. Like the video. And if you want to see more videos from me, you might want to subscribe. That's all I'm saying. Subscribe and it'll show up on your feed. It's kind of a pretty simple setup, really. And that's going to be it for now. Thank you for watching.